Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Archaeology After Dark. I am, of course, your host, Daniel Rhodes, and my guest today is Andrew Reinhardt. Andrew, thanks for being here.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much for having me, Daniel.
So, Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, let's first begin by saying that it's good to be talking from somebody to somebody back in the South. I was born in North Carolina and grew up in Florida and Texas, and so having been living in New Jersey and also in the Upper Midwest for most of my post high school life, it's good to get back and and talk to somebody in the South. So thank you. I'm an archaeologist. I got my bachelor's at the University of Evansville in classical archaeology, studying pottery from ancient Greece. I continued that at the University of Missouri at their Columbia campus for my master's. And then last year, it took me about 20 years to figure out what I wanted to write about for my dissertation. But last year I earned my PhD at the University of York in the UK. And so, and that was on digital archaeology, and specifically archaeology of digital environments like video games and other kinds of software.
And that leads us to our topic today is Archaeogaming. So, Andrew, where is a good place to start talking about Archaeogaming?
Archaeogaming, has been around kind of informally, for about 20 years now, 15, 20 years. But it really didn't get a name until 2013. So if folks go to archaeogaming.com, there's a blog that's been going there for, almost 8 years now, to talk about what video game archaeology actually is. And with archaeogaming, you can think of it in a couple of different ways. One way is to talk about how archaeologists and archaeological things are portrayed in video games. So if you think about like Lara Croft and Tomb Raider, or you think about Indiana Jones, those video games, from Atari or Lego Indiana Jones, or if you're in a video game and you're dealing with looting, or you're dealing with going into ancient spaces, like for example, if you're playing Assassin's Creed, I just finished Valhalla, which I really enjoyed. And going in there and looking at ancient spaces and what does that mean? So that's one half of archaeogaming. The other half of archaeogaming is treating video games as artifacts in and of themselves. So for example, today I'm wearing my excavation t-shirt from the 2014 excavations of the Atari burial ground in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And so if you're not familiar with that story, Atari dumped about close to 1 million video games back in 1983 into a desert landfill. And we went, and with the help of the city and a film crew, we actually excavated that to see what Atari had buried and to treat these artifacts from the 1980s as something of interest to contemporary archaeologists. So I like to think of games, as basically being things relating to archaeology, because they're part of what's called our material culture. People create these things, people use these things, they spend money and time on them. It makes us feel good when we play. All of those answer archaeological questions. It just happens to be now as opposed to, 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, and gaming itself has become a huge part of culture just around the world, and it influences, how it actually helps develop a survival skill. Really, thanks to COVID, so many people have spent months and months playing video games trying to avoid the walls closing in and, slowly going insane.
Oh, no, absolutely. I think 2020, I played more video games in 2020 than I have in memory. I've got a PlayStation, and then there's a computer running Steam downstairs, and I've got some really old games on a really old computer. So if I ever want to go back in time, I'll play those just to make myself feel good. So for example,
it gives you an appreciation for technology, how it advances over time.
Oh no, it's true. It's like I can't play Halo, on my laptop. I have to go downstairs to the basement computer to play Halo. Same thing with like Half-Life or Diablo 2, some of these older games. I have to use the old technology in order to play them because I can't do that, with the new tech that I've got on the upstairs level here. So yeah, we have to keep the hardware around, and they're artifacts too. I can't play one without the other.
Yeah, those people, might not see this the same way an archaeologist would, but a piece of culture like a video game or a console, if you find that, 10 years from now, or you find a console that's 20 years old, that is a piece of history, or, an
Yes.
artifact that somebody, if they're creative enough, might put it on display in a museum or something.
No, absolutely. There's some Reddit groups out there where people will go out and they'll find like a Game Boy in the woods, and they'll come back, or like a PSP or something like that, and they'll just find these things out in the world, and it's interesting to see what kind of context is there. Why is this in the woods? Is there anything else out there? Is it trash? Did somebody lose it out of their backpack or what? Do we know who it belonged to? What games are on it, or was there a cartridge or a chip in it that we can take a look at? So yeah, I mean, we're dealing with technology. I mean, humanity's always been dealing with technology, and that's really what archaeology is looking at the interaction of things and people. And it just happens that we're focused on the digital. At least I'm focused on the digital these days. And so yeah, that timeline is like this, but it's really rich. Yeah, so 20 years, it's ancient history for us.
Yeah. So thinking about, video games as a historian or an archaeologist gives you a different kind of perspective. Like, you used Assassin's Creed for an example. Mm-hmm. I've been playing Assassin's Creed since it started in the Crusades era, and they put a lot of work into those environments. And I'm thinking, a historian or an archaeologist had to have been consulted on this somehow, or else this would just look horrible.
Yeah, and it's true, and they have, especially with Assassin's Creed Origins, the recent games, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and also Valhalla. They've employed full-time historians and archaeologists to consult as they are building the worlds and as they are making the quests and the side quests. And even, now with the past couple of games, they've got, I guess it's called Discovery Mode, where it's a non-violent tour through the worlds they've created. And there's little tutorials and things that teachers are using with their students in classes, to talk about antiquity, or to talk about a certain place or a certain time. And so absolutely, they've historically worked, and Ubisoft has been really good about this, about working with archaeologists and historians to try to get things as accurate as possible while still keeping the game fun. And there are other companies that have done this too. I know that for like Call of Duty World War II, they had a World War II historian consult with them on authenticity. And a lot of these games, especially the war games, they'll go out and they'll have contracts with arms manufacturers. For example, I think Call of Duty, they had a contract with Winchester, so they could have those rifles in the game and get them right. So there's a lot of that going on, especially in the historical side of things.
Yeah, that's one thing that, you play a game like Assassin's Creed or something like it, and it gets down to very like day-to-day social details. Like, you can go into a tavern and you can actually play like a board game with someone that was actually played in the 1700s or the early 1600s, depending on which game it is.
Yeah, those are marvelous. Yeah, in Valhalla, you get to the name escapes me right now, but there's a board game from the 9th century that you sit there and play, and it's got dice and little kind of like pentate tablets that you can move around, and having those mini games. In these major games, it's nice to have a change of pace, but it's also you're learning about the history of play. Which in itself is a kind of archaeogaming too. It's like, how are they entertaining themselves, in the 1700s? How are they entertaining themselves in the 10th, 9th to 10th century? What were they playing? What were the rules? And if you go even further back, you can say, well, okay, how do we know this? there games like Senet, for example, from Egypt that we don't know the rules, but we can kind of figure them out based on the game boards that we found or the game pieces that we found, and so yeah, having those available to a modern audience is great because we get to learn and be in touch with the past through those.
But I mean, think about something like chess. That's a game, and it's been played for centuries. It's probably one of the oldest games on the planet.
True, and I'm trying to remember. I remember when I was in college playing battle chess on the computer, where here I am playing on a like a 386 or a 486 DOS machine, and it comes up, and it was just cool because the chess pieces actually fought. So if you wanted to have your pawn take a piece, your pawn would actually go and kick butt and take that piece, and you could watch the animation happen. And so but it was still based on the rules of chess. And I've got a chess app on my phone that I use, and it's just chess playing chess. It just happens to be digital because I don't have anybody local who wants to play with me anymore.
Well, after you've beaten everyone that's local, you need to, spread it out and beat up some kid in a game like who's on the other side of the world because he's talking smack about your mom.
That happened to me playing backgammon online. I was like, man, I did not come here to get abused like this. But this is another great thing about games as part of material culture internationally, is that I can be from Texas, and I can talk about a particular kind of smoker for barbecue or something, and that's going to be different from the way other people kind of smoke their meat around the world, and we can have a conversation about that. But if I say I'm playing Pac-Man, that's going to be the same. That arcade cabinet is the same here as it is elsewhere. Or if I'm playing World of Warcraft, I can have conversations with people in Europe, or South America or Asia, who are playing World of Warcraft too, and they have the same kinds of quests and the same, this, that, and the other. And it's like all of a sudden there's this shared vocabulary, the shared experience, because of this digital space, that's where everybody kind of meets in the middle. And so, yeah, if I'm playing, something with a common vocabulary like chess, people who know how to play chess, those rules are the same no matter where you are in the world. And so we're able to have that kind of communication, that kind of conversation, across all kinds of boundaries.
So how do they go about designing digital environments like this to make it accurate? I mean, what kind of research do they put into it to make sure it's as authentic as possible?
Yeah, if we can, keep on the Assassin's Creed stuff for a little bit.
Oh yeah,
this is another good example. Is that they'll have teams of photographers and videographers go out to these places, and if they're going to set something in ancient Greece, for example, they will send a team out there who will just go and photograph everything, video, and take videos and stuff. And they also use LiDAR. So they're doing 3D laser scanning of these environments so that, when you see something that's photorealistic in the game and you're actually exploring this stuff and you can get up really close and there's a lot of fine detail, this is by the grace of having, textures and skins in the game that are from real life, that have been scanned through technology and then ported into the game via an engine like Unity or Unreal Engine or something like that are used to produce these games. Same thing is true of like the artifacts. So, there's some museums that will license, their content, for entertainment purposes or for educational purposes, where you can go in and you can do 3D, photogrammetry of these artifacts. You put something on a turntable and you can spin it around while you're taking your videos of this or you're scanning it. And then you can import that into the game as something to be found or something to be used, something to be examined as a player, which is really cool. And with the new iPhones, I think the iPhone 12 Pro, that has LiDAR built into the phone. So you can start like 3D scanning your pets and or whatever, and have that imported if you're making your own games, and using your own content. So that's a really powerful tool. And I remember as an archaeologist when this was announced last year, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to put this into the game. This is amazing. They're going to put this into the phone, and so yeah, when it's time to upgrade, I'm going to see if I can bite the bullet and get one of those, just so I can play with the LiDAR capabilities and bring that in, so I can start making some games here, some small things just to play around.
It's all about traveling light. When you're an archaeologist, the less stuff you have to carry with you, the better.
No, you're absolutely right. So having that in your pocket and being able to get a pretty reasonable facsimile of something in the field, yeah, absolutely. You want to have that.
One game I've been playing a lot recently, I don't know if you've played it or not, is Ghost of Tsushima. And
I've not. That's on my list.
well, what you can do is you can actually travel across the gorgeous environments of feudal Japan. I don't know if it actually looked like that, what with the constant warfare and the stomach churning carnage, but you can actually pick up and examine artifacts left by the invading Mongolian horde.
Oh wow.
And they're actually shown with like cultural accuracy and everything. Like it gives you like a little like paragraph description of how it was made, what it was made for, and what they use it for in their own culture.
Yeah, I'm relieved to hear it. There've been other games that have tried this to some extent. I know when they rebooted Tomb Raider, for example, in 2013, they started bringing in things where if you found an artifact, you could manipulate that on the screen and it would give you a little bit of info. Or when I was playing Assassin's Creed Black Flag, you'd have a lot of detailed data about things that you found. Or if you picked up a sea shanty or something like that, you could read about the history of it and read the lyrics and listen to it. So I'm glad
the best
that
thing of any Assassin's Creed game, in my opinion, is sailing on a boat with drunken sailors while they sing to you.
I'm a fan. My daughter would sit there and she would just beg me to get on the ship, so that she could listen to the songs that they would sing. Absolutely.
I was researching privateering in the American Revolution for one of my undergrad projects, and I made a sea shanty playlist just for that reason.
Yeah, it's peaceful. Game soundtracks. I mean, this is another thing. That's part of kind of the Archaeogaming universe, and this is something that creates that environment. But these are also elements that help create that world and create that experience and lend some authenticity to the space. But they're also digital assets. So these were created by people who were hired to make the soundtracks and to do the music, and it elicits this kind of emotional response. So if I'm playing Heaven's Vault, for example, it's the best archaeological game I've ever played. It came out last year, and it's just terrific. But the soundtrack is awesome. It was so good that I bought it. I've only bought like 2 or 3 soundtracks in my life for video games, and that being one of them. And so I'll have it on my iPhone, and I'll listen to it when I go out for a walk. And it's evocative because I can see what's happening in the game when I hear these different musical cues that are going on. And I just wonder about archaeologists, digital archaeologists in the future that come upon these things, these soundtracks or whatever, independent of the game, and you're not going to be able to get that same kind of experience because you haven't played it. You can hear it, but you're not going to visualize what that action was when you're taking a look at things. And it's kind of like when you find an artifact just on a normal archaeological site. You pick up the thing, whatever that is, and about it because it might be a spear point or an arrowhead or something. You can understand what that is and where it came from and possibly who made it, but there's no memory that you can get from that artifact. And there's a video game called Control that they put out on the PS Plus network. It came out a couple of years ago. It's awesome because it deals with things like material memory, where you find artifacts, and these artifacts are actually imbued with powers that help you remember things and that carry their own memories too and give them power, which I thought was really cool.
So how do they go about laying it out in a story? Like, we have these artifacts. How do we accompany them or put them into the story to make it historically accurate, I guess is the phrase I'm looking for.
Yeah, for historical based games, I think the narrative comes first. They want to make a good story. The companies want to have interesting characters doing interesting things. They want to have plenty of conflict, plenty of places to go and interact. And once they figure out what the story is and who the characters are and where they want to go, then they can start kind of populating the world with things. So you have built environments. So you might have, churches or houses or caves, other kinds of different, structures, and you might have cities, and that was one of the great things about like playing games like Fallout, for example. Any of the games in the Fallout series are just wonderful because they've created these towns that you can go in and explore. And in games like Fallout 4, Fallout 76, you can go into these and there's not going to be any like, well, sometimes there's monsters and bad guys in there, but a lot of times they're just empty and you can just fiddle around. You can pick stuff up and manipulate them and take them. And so, the designers and the developers have to think, okay, what's going to be in a house? What's going to be in this cave, that will lend itself to some authenticity. And, a lot of times they're going to places like Wikipedia or Wikimedia, or, they're finding, general textbooks, picture books, National Geographics and stuff, just to flip through and say, okay, what's here, and what do we need to reproduce in order to make this feel like a real space, and then they'll go from there.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always enjoyed about playing a game is when you go pick up like a random like artifact, and it'll be like a set of keys, and it'll describe it as like an ancient wind.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
There's one game I've been playing, Horizon Zero Dawn.
Zero Dawn, yeah.
Yeah, you can actually go and collect coffee cups, and there's a guy you talk to, and he says they were used for an ancient religious ceremony, and she's like, no, I think people drank out of them.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, are you crazy? Something as valuable as this? Man, that was such a good game. And yeah, they're putting out a new one on PS5 either later this year or sometime next year. That's based on like Western civilizations that are, part of that universe. But man, that was one of the best games I've ever played.
Yeah.
And I love the archaeology in it, because here you are in this I don't want to use the word primitive, but it's like an ancient society in the future. Things have happened, and you're working with technologies that you don't really understand, and you're finding evidence of older technologies, stuff that we use every day. I mean, you talk about a coffee cup, I've got one right here. And so, it's like, wow. And you can imagine somebody finding this, with the logo and the perfect shape, and they're like, how did they get it so right? How is this so perfect? And, it just blew my mind, if I'd seen this for the first time. And of course I would have that impression like that collector has, of this kind of miraculous thing that, they probably make 1,000 of these a day, now.
But, in the future, it'll be like a one-of-a-kind item. It'll be like the last one of that thing.
Yeah, and I think most of them probably be broken, chipped or whatever. So being able to find something in just a perfect pristine condition under all the rubble, yeah, absolutely, it'd be something to value and something to appreciate. Plus, it's got a function, it's got a use. It's not just a pretty thing. You can actually have your coffee ritual, and something like this.
It's a religious experience to some people having their morning.
I tell you, I'm one of those people. I want to say something else about artifacts too, if I can. We're talking about artifacts and games and things that the players can pick up and use, and that could be in any game. But when you're looking at the other side of the Archaeogaming coin, you're looking at pieces of the game that are not necessarily intended. So, if you play a game, on the first day, there's probably some glitches. The game doesn't work quite as well as they thought it would sometimes. And, games like Assassin's Creed and also Elder Scrolls are famous. They're notorious for having these just amazing glitches where characters will show up and they don't have faces. There might be animals flying through the air that aren't supposed to be flying through the air.
Yeah, there's a mammoth
You might,
just like right up
yeah,
here. It's just there. You don't know why, but it's there, and you're like, wow, that's not
yeah.
supposed to
You know,
be there.
the first time I saw that, or like, playing Skyrim for the first time and then having the dragons fly backwards.
Oh
That
yeah,
was
that.
a nice one. um, but those are artifacts because they only appear for a certain period of time in the life of a game, and then the company comes in and they hopefully fix them, and then they disappear. And all of a sudden, the only record you have is maybe you took a video of it, maybe somebody took some screenshots of it, maybe somebody went on to Reddit, to write up a description about what happened, and it's gone. And you can't get these glitches back, especially if you're playing a game that's served online. You don't have the physical media anymore. I can't remember the last game. Maybe one of the Uncharted games was the last one I bought on disc, but everything else I just download and play. And because of that, it's always updating. You're always getting a different build, and anything cool that you saw, on the first week of play, you can't find that anymore. And so it becomes an artifact and part of the history of the game and part of the archaeological record digitally.
Yeah, that's one thing. Games are constantly needing changes and updates, and people will write it down, and people will go back and say, that never happened. I never saw it. It wasn't ever there.
Yeah, no, it's true, and yes, it's classic human behavior. I didn't see it, therefore it doesn't exist. So and that's an issue for archaeologists generally. I think we can come up with evidence-based solutions, but if it's alien to somebody else's experience, it's going to be hard to convince them otherwise. So having that kind of documentation, that kind of videography, those photographs, those descriptions, goes a long way to proving something, especially in a digital context. And you can always go back to patch lists. A lot of these games companies that will say what they fixed in version 2, what they fixed in version 3.1. And so there's going to be a list of things that used to be in the game that are no longer there because they fixed it in a patch, or they updated gameplay and they improved quality of life for a player or something like that. So it's not always bad things, but stuff changes, and that's true of anything archaeological. That's true of anything out in the natural world. It's always changing. Every day something's changing, and so why not have that be reflected in digital experiences that we undertake?
Yeah, it's one thing that they change in a game is they change it down to like the most minute details. Like in a patch, they're like, "Oh, you can pet cats now."
Yeah. It's
So
important.
you can just walk down the street in Havana during colonization and pet a dog, and then go
Yeah.
back to plundering and pillaging on the
Yes.
Caribbean.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a whole I think on Twitter that you can follow an account called "Can You Pet the Dog?" And if you go there every day, they put up a video game and they say, "Does it have animals in it? And can you pet the dog or can you not pet the dog?" And so that's a nice distraction from what 2020 and what 2021 are.
Yeah. So I was talking about Ghost of Tsushima earlier. You can actually in Japanese folklore, you can actually follow foxes and they lead you to treasures. And then
Oh,
after you
cool.
get the treasure, you can actually pet the fox and thank him for helping.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's delightful.
Yeah. And you can, visit shrines and it tells you what this deity you're worshiping, how it interacted in their social life. Like it was the god of the sea or the god of the mountain or the cave god or something.
Yeah, God, I love the value added stuff because when I was playing like adventure as a kid, or any of the old console games, for Atari or in television, or going to the arcade and playing those games, you just didn't get any of that. It was all action. And while it was fun, for somebody who's like 7 or 8 years old, I'd like to think that our tastes mature as we grow. And yeah, it's nice to have that extra story, that extra element of context, and as an archaeologist, that's always important anyway. just to see, more about the world as opposed to just going around and killing stuff.
Yeah, some people, if they don't understand that it's actually part of the world or part of the culture at the time, they just see it as busy work. But as historians or archaeologists, we see something like that and they're like, wow, they really went the extra mile to make sure that this is part of the story, that you get something out of being at this little
Yeah,
temple or shrine.
no, that's true. I mean, these educational bits, are there to add that extra bit of content, but even the largest things like I don't know if we want to get into this, but other games like Rome Total War, or Assassin's Creed, Odyssey or Valhalla, where the developers have introduced women in roles of power. They've made them generals, they've made them mercenaries or warriors, and part of the gaming community is like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? And then the developers are like, this is true, this happened, this is historical. And when the players are confronted with that kind of history that is totally goes against what they were expecting, there's just all kinds of social problems that pop up out of that, which is disappointing. But this is more about archaeology and working with the general public, is that sometimes the evidence is showing one thing when popular perception is fully invested in remembering how things were, and like Zack Snyder's film 300, for example, which is loosely based on history, but there's a lot of creative license taken in that. So when a game goes that extra step of adding history and archaeological evidence to support the narrative, sometimes that's surprising to people, and they have a really visceral reaction to it.
Yeah, it's like some people, they play a game and they would like a nice little source citation under the
Yeah.
information. So they're like, okay, I can go back and prove this now. But if there's no like Chicago or APA style citation here, this isn't true. This never happened.
Yeah. So we got to keep publishing. Keep
It
doing the
gives
work.
us satisfaction in what we do, knowing that we can prove gamers wrong.
Yeah, I don't want to be smug about it, because they're human beings too, and they've got feelings and whatever. But at the same time, it's like, hey, this is how it was, and here's how we know this. And if I was a gamer on the other side of the spectrum, I would hope that I would see that evidence and consider it rationally and say, oh, well, all right, I guess that's how it was. And if you want to push back, then you need to do the research. And it's just like any kind of science that you're doing, is that if you disagree, go and do the research, go put in the work. And if you have a counter argument or something to add that's constructive, okay, fine. So
That's what the internet's for, debating people
it's
you think are wrong.
It's debating quotes.
You're
Yeah,
wrong.
the rhetoric of online discourse, yeah, we've lost a lot of civility, I think, and it's just shouty, and yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah, I think part of it is quarantine. Some people have been inside for 6 or 8 months. The walls have closed in, and they're like, okay, I'm going to, go on the internet and argue with strangers because I think they're wrong.
Yeah, in such a miserable time, what's more fun than bringing more misery?
Yeah, absolutely.
I do not understand that way of thinking. I don't know. I always thought that the purpose of human beings is to mitigate suffering, and let's be kind.
And this brings us back to violent
argument.
video games. Yes.
Yeah.
Call of Duty.
Oh, it's it's fun shooting Nazis, I gotta say.
Yeah.
I remember just like for fun loading up certain. I was playing Medal of Honor Allied Assault, and just calling up certain quests or maps, just to go and shoot me some Nazis.
There's I don't know if you ever played Wolfenstein or not, but it's
Yeah,
alternative
yeah.
history if the Nazis had won the war. So that's all
Uh-huh.
you do is go and kill the Nazis because they took
Yeah.
over.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's big fun. It feels good. Yeah, I got no place in my heart for fascists or any of that. So it's good. You know, but it's good to blow off steam as long as you keep it in the game.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah.
So we were talking about how games change the way people look at things. You were talking about Valhalla, and you know the History Channel show Vikings. They have women in combat roles too. I try not to trust the things the History Channel does now,
Yeah, fair enough.
but it's one of the things that people are saying is more and more true. Seeing a woman in a combat role in that time.
Yeah, and I don't know why people are surprised by this. Um, it's people need to fight to keep what they have, and it's a collaborative effort. And if you're good and you're talented and you want to participate, then okay. And if the societal rules of that time allowed for that, then great. Um, so it's uh, it's interesting that people, I guess, think that there are these kind of gender splits over time, and it's just something that we've grown up with, through whatever education we've gotten. And I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have thought that you've got hunters, who go out and hunt, and they're the guys, and you've got the women who stay back and cook and mend the clothes and take care of the kids and stuff, and that's part of it, and that's part of it for some cultures. But then there are other elements in other cultures where you have that coming together, and there's that spirit of cooperation, and yeah, they're going to have folks who are going to be fighters, and women who are going to participate in combat and go out and hunt and fish and all of that stuff too. It's just part of being a contributor to society. And
I think a lot of them, at some point they realized that life is hard and they needed all the help they could get,
oh, sure.
or they were going to die.
Yeah, absolutely.
What with,
um,
the constant plundering and pillaging of each other's stuff.
yeah, yeah. It's just human nature. You want to protect what's yours.
Oh yeah. I mean, the last thing I want is some Viking horde showing up in my village and taking my gold.
That's right.
So how back to gaming.
Mhm.
How do the environments evolve over time? Like, how do they realize that, okay, this is a slight difference, but it's the way it is? I understand that what I just said makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it in a couple of different ways. You know, I uh, I was born the same year as Pong, and I've grown up, kind of side by side with video games. And so being able to be in the arcade, the first time Pac-Man came out, or the first time Defender came out, or Asteroids, or Space Invaders, and to go and play them, when the arcade got them, was awesome. And then playing console games on Atari or in television, and looking at these 8-bit and 16-bit little blocky guys going around on the screen, and thinking that was really cool. And then we're playing like football, or Pele soccer, or whatever, or baseball, and it's like it looks nothing like the game. It's kind of the same rules, kind of not. You can't tell who the players are. And then you look at a game like The Show, or Madden, and you have these photorealistic players on the screen doing stuff, and the stadiums look like the stadiums, and they've got the chants in the background, and the photorealism in these environments, and to be able to watch those change over time as the technology improves and as the taste of the audience change too. And we got to a point in the mid 20s, 2000s, where it's like, oh man, it can't get any better than this. And then they kept on producing more technology. So you've got 4K and 5G and it just kept
VR
getting more
now.
lifelike. And yeah, and so you're actually in the game. And as a kid, I was dreaming about this. Like, I saw Tron. I'm like, oh man, I'm totally getting in the game. It's like, this is going to be amazing, and it happened. It happened. It totally happened. And so, and now though there's this kind of pushback in a way, where you're seeing some retro games. I played Undertale a couple of years ago for the first time, and that's a throwback. It's very modern in what it's communicating it to a player, but it looks like an old game from the 1980s or early 1990s, and it's incredible. Or you play a game like Minecraft, and everything's kind of blocky and stuff, but it's fun, and you're still making things and having a good time, but it just doesn't look like you look out your window. It's something that's totally different. And so with those kinds of environments, it's been interesting to watch them change as people have changed and as the technology's changed, and to see this kind of pushback to almost like a nostalgic level. It's like, oh, this is really fun, but boy, do I miss playing games from 1986.
It
So
makes you miss GoldenEye 64.
oh, that's a classic, and absolutely, these are some of the games that just the mention of the title and people would just swoon. They're like, oh my God. And then you'll have this conversation with them for like an hour about all the detail and everything, because, you guys played it at the same time and it knocked you out, and it still stands out today. Those games are fun and they're rare. So, you might have the best technology, the best looking game in the world, and if there's not a good story, if there's not good conflict, not good character, you're not going to have that same kind of emotion. And I think that, boils down to how you feel about things. So if I play, an old game, it might not look like much, but I had fun playing it. I'm going to remember it fondly. And it's that kind of material memory that I've invested into this particular disc, my copy, um, that I feel that others might feel, or I could like it and nobody else liked that game, but I liked it. So you've got that too.
I will say this, being in the field for archaeology and then coming home and playing a video game, it really makes me appreciate the waist deep water that somebody is wading through in a game. And I'm like, oh, as an archaeologist, I totally know what it's like to have water in my boots.
Oh, absolutely. I guess there's some levels in like The Last of Us, which is, parts of those games are set in the South too, and you're going through swampy areas, or like Resident Evil 7, where it's this kind of Southern Gothic game. And yeah, as an archaeologist, working in the South for a little bit and knowing what that heat and that humidity feel like, and knowing, the water between the toes and
That
all of
nice
that.
red clay in between your feet and staining everything you own. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh man. So yeah, you bring that extra bit of context with you as the player. You're like, okay, and so you're mixing the reality of the game with your own experienced reality, for something a little extra. Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny that you mentioned Resident Evil 7. I actually just got done playing it the other day, and
Uh-huh.
I was actually surprised at how accurate the architecture of their very antebellum looking house was. And I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, that's actually how
yeah.
a lot of the houses in Louisiana, some parts of Mississippi, even here in Alabama, still look to
Hmm.
this day.
Hmm. No, it added that extra creepy factor because it did look real and it did feel real. Did you play it in VR or not?
No, I did not, because
Okay.
I don't have the patience to stand there with my hands going.
Yeah. I got I'd gotten a micro grant from my university to buy a headset a few years ago, and I kept it, but don't tell them. And so I got Resident Evil 7. I had the VR rig, and so I played that. And boy, I've never been more scared in my life playing a game. Um, but being able to explore the house as like you were inside the house, was terrific. And the fact that it did look like these other antebellum places, you know, um, added to that reality. Because sometimes if things look a little fakey, or if they've taken a little too much license, it kind of brings you out of that space. it's a distraction almost, especially as an archaeologist. You're like, hey, wait a minute. But you know, when Capcom, you know,
This
gets it
water
right like they
isn't
did with that
clean.
game.
I've seen what a river in Alabama looks like.
Oh man.
There's no such thing
So
as
yeah,
crystal clear water.
no, no, absolutely not. So yeah, it's nice when they have that reality there, because then, you know, it doesn't get in the way of your experience as a player. You know, it just supports whatever's happening on the screen.
It connects you to, you know, a sense of maybe nostalgia because you're, you know, seeing a piece of history that you are actually like relating to. And then you can go through this house and find decades old newspaper articles about, you know, grisly murders and things that you're realizing, oh, wow, that happened in this house and I have to get out of here immediately.
Yeah, yeah,
And then you shudder at the fact because all the doors are locked and you're trapped.
yeah. I know. I'm happy to report that that never happened to me, you know, in the real world. So, so as long as they keep it in the game, you know, just as that, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't need to experience that for real.
So we're gonna wrap this up.
Okay.
So say somebody wanted to get started studying archaeogaming,
Yeah.
gaming history, or archaeology in general. What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah. You know, there's a really good support network online right now. So, you know, if you're on social media, especially Twitter, and you use the Archaeogaming hashtag, that'll plug you into a community of dozens of people, researchers, scholars, players, who are working on this stuff, you know, either archaeology in games or archaeology of games. And, you know, then you can make these connections to these other people and start asking questions. And, you know, you can really kind of jump right in. You know, go to the blog, archaeogaming.com, see what's there. I've, all right, this is shameless. I've got a book called Archaeogaming, an introduction to archaeology in and of video games, that people can find. It's a good introduction. It talks about all of the basics, you know, if you want to get involved in video game archaeology. And you know, if you just, you know, run a search for archaeology in video games, a lot of stuff's just going to come up that you can begin to, you know, to read and to figure out. There are, if you're interested in going to school for this, there are a number of graduate programs that have digital archaeology as a component, or digital heritage as a component, in the US, and specifically also in the UK and in Europe too. So that you can go to these programs and earn, you know, a master's or a PhD in, you know, digital heritage, digital archaeology, and you can specialize in games if that's something that you want to do. And this can be anything from understanding games as an archaeologist to learning how to do reconstructions in 3D, how to 3D model things, which is super practical. You know, if you wanted to get a career in game design, game development, game art, or if you want to contribute archaeologically to reconstructing sites, reconstructing artifacts, you know, for the record and for publication, and for other kinds of heritage experiences through museums and stuff like that too. So it's a good window into a lot of different things that you can have, you know, for career.
Yeah, we got a 3D printer at a museum I was working for not too long ago, and it made what we do so much easier.
Oh yeah.
We could recreate tools, fossils,
Mhm.
and it made it very nice and easy to carry, and we could break it if we wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the advent of 3D printing has been just stupendous, you know, because you can print things to scale, 1 to 1, or you could have like a something that's like 10 times smaller than the actual thing. And yeah, because these are perishable, you know, these aren't unique. You have the models, you have the mesh. Uh, it's okay if you break them, you know, it's okay if you lose them, it's fine. And it does add a bit to the preservation of antiquity also. You know, you can work with these things, you know, and you can hold them and not worry about, you know, breaking the original.
Yeah. Well, that is going to wrap up this episode. Thanks for tuning in. And Andrew, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. This was fun.
Absolutely.